My name is Sarah Bennett, and I'm 24 years old, a newly graduated nurse with big dreams. When my mum died 13 years ago, I moved in with my Aunt Linda, who constantly reminded me I was a financial burden. The envelope I received after my college graduation wasn't a congratulatory card, but a detailed $50,000 invoice for raising me. Now, sitting in this courtroom as my own aunt sues me for my childhood expenses, I wonder how life led us here. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from. Hit that like and subscribe button and let me know if you've ever had family betray your trust like this. Before everything fell apart, my childhood was filled with warmth and love. My mum, Emily, raised me by herself after my dad passed away when I was just 3 years old. Though money was tight in our small 2-bedroom apartment in Boise, Idaho, Mum always made sure I never felt like we were struggling. She worked long shifts as a nurse at St. Luke's Medical Center, coming home with stories about saving lives and making a difference in people's darkest moments. Those stories planted the seed for my own dream of becoming a nurse someday. Every weekend was our special time together. We'd bake cookies on Saturday mornings, the smell of vanilla and chocolate filling our tiny kitchen. Sunday afternoons were for visiting the local park, feeding ducks at the pond, or browsing books at the library. Mum always said, "Sarah, education is the one thing nobody can take from you," as she helped me with homework at our kitchen table. The walls of our apartment were covered with my artwork and school certificates. Mum kept every single one, proudly displaying them like precious museum pieces. When I brought home good grades, she'd stick them on the refrigerator with fruit-shaped magnets and dance around the kitchen in celebration. For my 10th birthday, Mum surprised me with a children's medical kit. I carried that thing everywhere, taking the temperature of my stuffed animals and listening to Mum's heartbeat with the plastic stethoscope. "You'll be wearing a real one someday," she'd say, her eyes crinkling with pride. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Mum worked extra shifts during holidays to give me special Christmas mornings and birthday celebrations. She taught me to appreciate what we had rather than yearn for what we didn't. "Gratitude makes any life rich," she'd remind me when I occasionally complained about not having the latest toys or fancy clothes like some of my classmates. Everything changed the summer I turned 12. Mum started coming home from work more exhausted than usual. At first, she blamed it on extra shifts, but when she began losing weight rapidly and developed a persistent cough, I knew something was wrong. I'd catch her wincing in pain or popping painkillers when she thought I was asleep. The day she finally went to the doctor, I waited at our neighbour Mrs. Wilson's apartment, working on a science project, but unable to focus. When Mum returned, her face told me everything before she said a word. Stage 4 lung cancer, terminal, 6 months to a year. Those words crashed into our happy little world like a wrecking ball. Mum tried to maintain normalcy, but our roles slowly reversed. I started making dinner, doing laundry, and helping her to bed when she was too weak to walk. I kept a notebook of her medication schedule, becoming fiercely protective of her diminishing energy. School became secondary as I transformed into my mother's caretaker. My 12-year-old shoulders carried the weight of groceries, household chores, and the creeping dread of what was coming. Friends stopped calling as I couldn't go out anymore, but I didn't care. Every moment with Mum became precious, measured, finite. The hospice nurse started visiting daily when Mum could no longer get out of bed. I'd sit beside her, reading her favourite books, or just holding her increasingly frail hand. "You're so strong, Sarah," she'd whisper. "Promise me you'll keep going. Keep shining after I'm gone." On a quiet Tuesday morning, just 3 weeks after my 13th birthday, Mum took her last breath while I held her hand. The hospice nurse found me still sitting there an hour later, unable to let go. The world had never felt so empty, so vast, so terrifying. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and pitying looks. I stood numb as people I barely recognized hugged me and murmured platitudes about my mother being in a better place. What place could be better than here with me? That's when Aunt Linda appeared. My mother's younger sister had always been distant, visiting only on rare holidays with expensive gifts and limited conversation. Now she stood beside me at the funeral, her hand on my shoulder, telling everyone how she'd take care of her poor orphaned niece. The social worker met with Linda and my elderly grandmother, who lived in a senior community and couldn't take me in. It was decided I would move in with Linda, her husband Tom, and their daughter Olivia. Linda appeared caring and concerned in front of the social workers, promising to give me a loving home during this difficult transition. As I packed up my childhood into boxes, I found a letter Mum had written me tucked into my favourite book. Remember who you are, Sarah. Life will throw storms your way, but you have the strength to weather them all. I'll love you always, even when you can't see me anymore. I folded that letter into my pocket, took one last look at our apartment, and stepped into my new life, unaware of the challenges that awaited me. The drive to Aunt Linda's house in Spokane, Washington, took nearly 3 hours, leaving behind everything familiar. Each mile increased the hollow feeling in my chest as I watched my hometown disappear in the side mirror of Linda's luxury SUV. She didn't say much during the journey, occasionally commenting on how different my life would be now, how much better things would be in their neighborhood. Linda and Uncle Tom lived in an impressive 2-story colonial house with pristine white columns and a perfectly manicured lawn. My cousin Olivia, 14 and impossibly poised, greeted us with a rehearsed smile that didn't reach her eyes. Uncle Tom, a tall man with a perpetual expression of mild disinterest, briefly welcomed me before returning to his home office. "This will be your room," Linda said, opening the door to a space at the end of the hallway, far from the other bedrooms. The walls were stark white, the furniture basic and clearly second-hand compared to the glimpses I'd caught of Olivia's room with its pink walls and custom furniture. "We can add some colour later, maybe," she added as an afterthought. That first night, Linda prepared a special dinner, and everyone made polite conversation. Uncle Tom asked about my interests, and Linda even shared a few memories of my mother from their childhood. For a moment, I dared to hope that maybe this arrangement would work out okay. The shift came gradually. By the end of my first week, Linda had presented me with house rules that didn't seem to apply to Olivia. I had a strict curfew, limited bathroom time, designated study hours, and a list of chores that grew longer each day. "In this house, everyone contributes," Linda explained while handing me a toilet brush. Meanwhile, Olivia lounged by their backyard pool, her own chores mysteriously non-existent. My belongings, which had filled our apartment, now looked meagre scattered around the spare room. Linda had gone through my boxes before I could unpack, setting aside clothes she deemed too worn or inappropriate. When I asked about them, she said, "We have standards in this neighborhood, Sarah. You represent our family now. School was another adjustment. My academic records transferred, but nothing else did. No friends, no history, no teachers who knew my capabilities. I was placed in standard classes despite having been in advanced programs at my previous school. When I mentioned this to Linda, she dismissed my concerns. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You've been through a trauma. Best to take it easy." The first time I truly understood my place in the household came when school supplies were purchased. Olivia received a new laptop, designer backpack, and top-of-the-line everything. I was given a plastic binder, basic notebooks, and pens from the dollar store. "We have to be mindful of expenses," Linda said when she saw my expression. "Your mother didn't leave much for your care." That night, I heard Linda and Tom arguing through the thin walls. "The social security checks barely cover the extra expenses," Linda's voice carried. "Do you know how much teenagers eat? How much their activities cost?" "She's family, Linda," Tom replied, his voice tired, resigned. "Family that's costing us." Emily was always irresponsible, not planning better for her daughter. I buried my face in my pillow, tears soaking through as I clutched my mother's letter. The money comments became a regular feature of life with Linda. If I outgrew clothes, needed school supplies, or even ate what she deemed too much at dinner, I was reminded of the financial burden I represented. "Do you know how much braces cost?" she muttered when the dentist recommended them. We left without scheduling the orthodontic work. "College applications are $70 each," she complained when I brought home information about universities with nursing programs. "Maybe community college would be more appropriate for your situation." The contrast between my treatment and Olivia's grew more pronounced. Olivia received a car for her 16th birthday. I was told I could get a job to save for my own transportation. Olivia's room was redecorated seasonally. My bedspread had been the same faded blue since my arrival. Olivia attended dance classes, lacrosse practice, and SAT prep courses. I was told such extras weren't in the budget for me. Uncle Tom witnessed it all with passive acceptance. Occasionally, he'd slip me $20 or offer to drive me somewhere when Linda refused, but he never directly challenged her treatment of me. "Your aunt is under a lot of pressure," he'd say, as though that explained everything. Throughout it all, the memory of my mother's warmth became both comfort and torture. I'd close my eyes at night and try to remember the sound of her laugh, the feeling of her hand brushing hair from my face. Those memories sustained me through Linda's coldness, through Olivia's casual cruelty, through the growing awareness that I wasn't wanted in this house. I began spending more time at the school library, volunteering for any activity that kept me away from Linda's critical gaze. I joined study groups, helped teachers after class, and discovered that academic success could be a form of escape. If I couldn't have love, I could at least have achievement. One evening, while cleaning the kitchen as required by my chore list, I accidentally knocked over Linda's purse. As I gathered the spilled contents, I found a letter from the Social Security Administration addressed to Linda as my guardian. It referenced monthly survivor benefits being deposited for my care. The amount was substantial, far more than Linda had implied she received. That night, I carefully replaced my mother's photo on my nightstand, the one Linda had suggested I put away to help with the grieving process. I looked into my mother's smiling eyes and made a silent promise. I would endure, I would succeed, and someday I would escape. High school brought new challenges, but also unexpected opportunities. Despite Linda's dismissal of my academic potential, I fought to be placed in honours classes and quickly proved I belonged there. My science teachers particularly noticed my aptitude, and by sophomore year, I had joined the Health Sciences Club, the first step toward my dream of following in my mother's footsteps. "Another club meeting?" Linda would ask with thinly veiled irritation. "I suppose you'll need money for that too." I never asked for money anymore. Instead, I'd secured a part-time job at Sweet Harvest Bakery 3 afternoons a week and all day Saturday. The owner, Mrs. Martinez, became a bright spot in my life, slipping me extra pastries at closing time and adjusting my schedule during exam periods. My first paycheck felt like freedom in my hands until Linda cornered me in the kitchen. "Now that you're earning an income, you'll need to contribute to household expenses," she announced, hand extended. $300 monthly seems fair for room and board. The amount represented nearly half my earnings, but I handed it over without argument. Fighting Linda only made things worse, as I'd learned through painful experience. Later that night, I overheard Linda telling Uncle Tom how she was teaching me financial responsibility by collecting rent. Olivia, now a senior and self-appointed queen of the school, made sure everyone knew I was her charity case cousin. She spread stories about my mother's death, embellishing details for maximum pity or sometimes mockery, depending on her audience. When boys showed interest in me, she warned them about my unstable family background and probable emotional issues. One rainy Tuesday during junior year, I stayed late to make up a chemistry lab. Walking to the bus stop, I realized I'd missed the last one. As I resigned myself to a 3-mile walk in the downpour, a car pulled alongside me. Mrs. Thompson, my AP biology teacher, rolled down her window. "Sarah, get in before you drown." During the drive home, Mrs. Thompson asked questions about my interest in medicine, my study habits, my plans after high school. When she pulled up to Linda's house, she hesitated before saying, "You know, you remind me of myself at your age, determined, focused, despite obstacles." Something in her tone made me look up sharply. Mrs. Thompson smiled gently. "My door is always open if you need to talk about anything." 2 weeks later, after Linda had confiscated half my paycheck for utilities, I used excessively. I found myself in Mrs. Thompson's classroom during lunch. The words poured out of me, the financial manipulation, the emotional neglect, the social security letter I'd found. Mrs. Thompson listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "Have you considered that your aunt may be misusing funds meant for your care?" she finally asked. The thought had occurred to me, but hearing it from an adult gave it legitimacy. "What can I do? I'm a minor. She's my guardian." Mrs. Thompson's reply changed everything. "Start documenting, keep records, and let's look into scholarship options that could get you out of there after graduation." With Mrs. Thompson's guidance, I began researching nursing scholarships obsessively. I joined every club that might strengthen my applications, volunteered at the local hospital on Sundays, and maintained perfect grades despite working nearly 20 hours weekly. One evening, while searching for a stapler in Uncle Tom's home office, I discovered a folder labelled with my name. Inside were years of Social Security statements showing monthly deposits of over $1,000 for my care. Nearly $60,000 had been paid to Linda since my mother's death. Yet I wore second-hand clothes, lacked basic school supplies, and was made to feel guilty for every morsel of food I consumed. I photographed the documents with trembling hands, then carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. That night, I emailed the photos to Mrs. Thompson and to myself at my school email address, creating evidence I hoped I'd never need to use. Senior year arrived with university applications and the quiet determination to escape Linda's house forever. Mrs. Thompson helped me apply for every scholarship available, editing my essays during lunch periods and after school. When acceptance letters began arriving, Linda intercepted them, presenting each with comments about the burden of student loans and unrealistic expectations. The breakthrough came in April, a full-ride nursing scholarship to Boise State University, including housing, meals, and a stipend for books. When the thick envelope arrived, I raced to check the mail before Linda could, hiding the letter under my mattress until I could fully read its contents. That night, I called Mrs. Thompson with the news, my voice barely containing my excitement. "I got it! I'm free. My high school graduation ceremony should have been a celebration. Instead, Linda complained about the cost of my cap and gown, the waste of ordering announcements, and the impracticality of the nursing program I'd chosen. Olivia, home from her first year at an expensive private college, fully funded by her parents, rolled her eyes throughout Linda's monologue. I scanned the audience during the ceremony, disappointed but not surprised to find the section where Linda and Tom should have been sitting empty. As I accepted my diploma, I heard a distinct cheer from the back. There stood Mrs. Thompson alongside Mrs. Martinez from the bakery, both clapping wildly. After the ceremony, Mrs. Thompson handed me a small gift bag. Inside was a professional stethoscope, just like my mother had used. The card read simply, "Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become. I know I am. For the first time since my mother died, I felt seen, valued, and championed." Walking back to Linda's house that day, diploma in hand and stethoscope in my bag, I knew I was just weeks away from a new beginning. The day I moved into my college dormitory felt like breathing fresh air after years underwater. Boise State University was only 40 miles from Linda's house, but it might as well have been another planet. My residence hall room was small, with institutional furniture and cinder block walls, yet it represented something priceless: independence. My roommate, Mia, arrived with her parents, who helped her unpack boxes and hang fairy lights around her side of the room. They offered to help with my things too, but my entire life fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. Linda had dropped me off at the campus entrance, not even bothering to park. "Text when you're settled," she'd said, already putting the car in drive. "And remember, your scholarship doesn't cover holiday breaks. We'll need to discuss compensation if you plan to stay with us during those times." Mia and I became fast friends despite our different backgrounds. She came from a loving family who called her daily, sent care packages, and genuinely wanted to know about her classes. When she realized I never received such calls or packages, she began sharing hers without comment. "My mum always sends too much anyway," she'd say, dividing cookies or toiletries between us. University life demanded intense focus. The nursing program was rigorous, with early morning clinicals, late-night study sessions, and endless practical exams. I thrived under the pressure, remembering my mother's dedication to her patients. To cover expenses not included in my scholarship, I worked at the campus coffee shop and took weekend shifts at a nearby assisted living facility. Between classes, work and studying, I barely had time to think about Linda, which was exactly how I wanted it. The less contact, the better. Still, holiday breaks loomed on the calendar like dark clouds. Before Thanksgiving break my freshman year, Linda called with expectations for my visit. "Since you're not contributing financially anymore, we'll need compensation for your stay." $300 for the week seems fair. Food isn't free, Sarah. I swallowed hard, calculating how many extra shifts I'd need to afford going home for the holiday. Mia, overhearing my end of the conversation, waited until I hung up before saying, "Come home with me instead." "My parents would love to have you." That Thanksgiving became the first of many holidays spent with Mia's family. The Wilsons welcomed me without question, including me in family photos and traditions, as though I'd always been there. Mrs. Wilson, learning about my nursing studies, shared stories from her own career as a physical therapist. Mr. Wilson taught me to make his famous cranberry sauce, standing beside me in the kitchen with patient instructions. When Linda called on Christmas to ask when I'd be arriving with my room and board payment, I informed her I had made other arrangements. Her surprised pause was followed by concern, not for my well-being, but for the lost income. Spring semester brought new challenges and opportunities. I was accepted into an accelerated program that would allow me to complete my degree in 3 years instead of 4. The workload increased dramatically, but so did my determination. During a campus career fair, I met Ethan, a medical student, volunteering at the healthcare booth. Tall, with kind eyes and a quiet confidence, he struck up a conversation about my interest in pediatric nursing. Before long, we were meeting for coffee between classes, talking for hours about healthcare ethics, patient advocacy, and our personal journeys to medicine. "My dad's a surgeon," Ethan explained during one of our coffee dates. "He expected me to follow exactly in his footsteps, but I'm interested in family practice in underserved communities." We've been at odds about it for years. His understanding of family pressure created a bond between us that deepened with each conversation. When I finally shared the full story of Linda's treatment, he listened without judgment, then asked the question that had been hovering in my mind for years. "Have you considered that what she did might be illegal?" Social Security benefits for surviving children are meant to provide for the child, not supplement the guardian's income. During spring break of my sophomore year, instead of accepting another invitation from Mia's family, I stayed on campus to research. The nearly empty library became my second home as I dug through legal websites and forums for similar situations. What I discovered left me stunned. Guardians misappropriating survivors' benefits could face serious legal consequences, including fraud charges. I made an appointment with the university's legal aid office, bringing copies of the Social Security statements I'd photographed from Uncle Tom's office. The student attorney who reviewed my case looked increasingly serious as I explained the situation. "This isn't just unethical," he said finally. "It's potentially criminal. Your aunt had a fiduciary responsibility to use those funds for your direct benefit." What are my options? I asked, heart pounding. You could file a complaint, possibly pursue recovery of funds, but that would mean legal action against your aunt, he replied, studying my face. It's a big step. Think about it carefully. I left the office with resources and information, but no clear decision. That night, I called Mrs. Thompson, who had remained a trusted mentor throughout my college years. You don't have to decide anything right now, she advised. Focus on your education. Document everything. The statute of limitations gives you time. Junior year brought clinical rotations that cemented my passion for nursing. Working with actual patients, particularly children, reminded me daily why I'd chosen this path. My professors praised my combination of technical skill and compassion, attributes I'd learned watching my mother work. Ethan and I grew closer, supporting each other through exams and late-night study sessions. When he invited me to meet his parents over summer break, I accepted with only slight trepidation. Unlike Linda, Dr. and Mrs. Carter welcomed me warmly, asking thoughtful questions about my studies and goals. Sarah has the highest GPA in the nursing program, Ethan announced proudly over dinner. Dr. Carter raised his glass in a toast. To excellence and compassion in healthcare. The world needs more providers like you two. The contrast between Ethan's family and my experience with Linda couldn't have been starker. That night, lying in the comfortable guest room of the Carters' home in Missoula, Montana, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge the full extent of Linda's betrayal. It wasn't just about money. It was about denying me the love and support a child deserves after losing their only parent. As graduation approached, job offers began coming in thanks to my academic record and glowing recommendations from clinical supervisors. I accepted a position at Seattle Children's Hospital in the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit with a starting salary that would finally provide true financial stability. 2 weeks before graduation, Ethan proposed during a picnic at the campus lake where we'd had our first real date. The vintage sapphire ring had belonged to his grandmother, he explained, given to him with her blessing after she'd met me during a family dinner. You don't have to answer right away, he said, reading my shocked expression. I know we're both starting our careers and timing is complicated. I kissed him, tears streaming down my face. Yes, absolutely. Yes, life was finally taking shape according to my own design, not Linda's restrictions or limitations. As I prepared for graduation, for my new job, for a future with Ethan, I believed the chapter with Linda was closed. I was wrong. My graduation day dawned bright and clear, a perfect May morning that felt symbolic of my new beginning. Mia and I helped each other into our caps and gowns, taking dozens of photos in our dorm room one last time. The Wilsons arrived early, bringing flowers and hugs. Ethan and his parents came bearing a gift bag containing a beautiful new lab coat with Sarah Bennett, RN, embroidered on the pocket. As we gathered outside the auditorium, I spotted an unexpected trio approaching. Linda, Uncle Tom, and Olivia, all dressed in what I recognized as their public appearance outfits. Linda's smile was wide but didn't reach her eyes. We wouldn't miss our Sarah's big day, she announced loudly enough for nearby families to hear, placing possessive emphasis on our. She air-kissed my cheeks while whispering, We need to talk after the ceremony. Throughout the graduation, I could feel Linda's gaze on me. When my name was called, I heard her voice rise above others. That's my niece. I raised her after her mother died this summer. The ceremony concluded with mortarboards flying into the air and tears of joy all around. As graduates dispersed to find their families, Linda intercepted me before I could reach the Wilsons and Carters. We brought you a graduation gift, she said, pressing a thick envelope into my hands. Open it now. Inside was not a card, but what appeared to be an invoice meticulously itemized on Linda's personal stationery. The heading read, Expenses incurred in raising Sarah Bennett, 2012 to 2017. The list was extensive and detailed: room and board, 60 months at $500 per month, $30,000, clothing and personal items, $4,850, school supplies and activities, $3,275, medical and dental expenses, $5,200, transportation and miscellaneous, $6,675. The total at the bottom, circled in red pen, $50,000. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the celebratory noise around us. "A reality check," Linda replied, her smile never wavering for the benefit of onlookers. "Now that you're officially an adult with a career, it's time to repay what you owe. We made many sacrifices to provide for you after your mother's irresponsibility left you with nothing." Uncle Tom looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Olivia smirked slightly. "I don't owe you anything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The government sent you money every month specifically for my care." Linda's smile tightened. "Barely enough to cover basics. This bill reflects additional expenses. We expect monthly payments, beginning with your first nursing paycheck." Before I could respond, Ethan appeared at my side, sensing tension. "Everything okay here?" I introduced him briefly, watching Linda's expression shift as she noted his confident posture and the expensive watch that marked him as coming from money. "Just a family matter," Linda said smoothly. "Sarah understands her obligations." That evening, surrounded by the Wilsons, Carters, and friends from the nursing program at a celebration dinner, I tried to push Linda's invoice from my mind. Ethan, sensing my distraction, squeezed my hand under the table. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together," he whispered. 3 days later, an official-looking letter arrived at my new apartment. A law firm representing Linda Bennett was demanding payment of $50,000 for care and support provided to Sarah Bennett during her minor years. It threatened legal action if a payment plan wasn't established within 30 days. Panic seized me. I called Ethan, who immediately connected me with his father. Dr. Carter listened carefully to my situation, then recommended a lawyer friend who specialized in family law. "Don't respond to anything yet," he advised. "Let's get professional guidance first." James Carter's law office was modest but neat, with diplomas from prestigious schools lining the walls. After reviewing Linda's invoice and the legal letter, he leaned back in his chair with a puzzled expression. "This is unusual," he admitted. "Guardians typically don't sue former wards for basic care expenses, especially when they've received government benefits for that purpose." He studied me thoughtfully. "There's something more going on here. Tell me everything about your time with your aunt." For the next 2 hours, I detailed life with Linda, the constant reminders of my cost, the different treatment compared to Olivia, the discovery of social security statements, and Linda's increasing demands for money once I began working. James took extensive notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he closed his notebook decisively. "I'll take your case," he said, "and I don't think you'll owe your aunt a dime when we're done." The next weeks were a flurry of legal preparation. James filed a counterclaim denying Linda's right to reimbursement. He also submitted requests for financial records related to my mother's estate and any benefits received on my behalf. During this process, we uncovered surprising information. My mother had maintained a modest life insurance policy naming me as beneficiary. The funds should have been placed in trust for my benefit. Additionally, there was a small inheritance from my maternal grandparents that I'd never been informed about. "Where did this money go?" I asked James during a meeting at his office. "That's exactly what we need to find out," he replied, typing another note. "Your aunt had legal obligations as your guardian to manage these assets in your best interest." 2 months after Linda's initial demand, we received notice of a court date. The lawsuit was moving forward, with Linda seeking the full $50,000 plus legal fees. James seemed oddly pleased by this development. "Now we'll have discovery," he explained. "Legal power to demand financial records she might otherwise withhold." Through formal discovery requests, James obtained bank statements, tax returns, and benefit records from Linda's accounts during my time in her home. What they revealed was shocking. Not only had Linda received monthly Social Security survivor benefits of over $1,000, but she had also collected the life insurance payout and inheritance money. The total amount that should have been used for my care or held in trust, nearly $190,000. She spent all of it, James said grimly, reviewing the financial analysis. And now she's suing you for more. How is that possible? I asked, staring at the figures. How could she legally take all that money? She couldn't. That's the point, James replied, organizing documents into a trial folder. Your aunt didn't just fail to provide adequately for you using funds specifically designated for that purpose. She potentially committed fraud. As our court date approached, I struggled to balance preparation for the case with starting my new job at Seattle Children's Hospital. Ethan provided unwavering support, accompanying me to meetings with James and helping research similar cases. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. Memories of my mother flooded back, her gentle hands checking my temperature when I was sick, her proud smile at school events, her whispered encouragements when tasks seemed too difficult. What would she think of all this? In the darkness of my bedroom, I whispered to her memory, "I'm trying to be strong, Mum. I hope you'd be proud of who I've become despite everything." The next morning, I dressed carefully in a conservative navy dress and low heels, my mother's small pearl earrings my only jewelry. Ethan drove me to the courthouse, where James waited on the steps with a confident smile. "Ready?" he asked. Taking a deep breath, I nodded. "Ready!" The county courthouse in Tacoma, Washington, was an imposing brick building with marble columns and high ceilings that amplified every footstep. Ethan and Mia flanked me as we walked through security, their presence providing silent strength. James led us to a polished wooden bench outside courtroom C, where we waited for our case to be called. Across the corridor, Linda, Uncle Tom, and Olivia sat with their attorney, a sleek man in an expensive suit who kept checking his gold watch. Linda had dressed for the occasion in a conservative cream suit that screamed respectable citizen. When our eyes briefly met, she gave me a small, confident smile that sent chills down my spine. "All these years," I whispered to Ethan, "she made me feel like I was taking food from her table, wearing clothes she could barely afford to provide." "Don't focus on her," James advised, overhearing. "Today is about facts, not feelings. Let the evidence speak." At 9:30, the bailiff called our case. Bennett versus Bennett, Judge Margaret Ellison presiding. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, with only a few spectators scattered among the benches. Judge Ellison, an African-American woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and penetrating eyes, nodded briskly as we took our places. "I've reviewed the filings in this case," she began. "Mrs. Linda Bennett is suing her niece, Sarah Bennett, for reimbursement of child-rearing expenses in the amount of $50,000 plus legal fees. Miss Sarah Bennett has filed a counterclaim. Let's proceed with opening statements." Linda's attorney, Mr. Reynolds, approached the bench first. His voice was smooth as butter as he painted Linda as a selfless relative who stepped in after tragedy, sacrificing financially to provide a stable home for her orphaned niece. "Your Honor, my client opened her home and her heart when her sister tragically passed away, leaving a 13-year-old daughter with no resources and no provisions for her care. For 5 years, the Bennetts provided food, shelter, clothing, educational support, and emotional stability during a difficult time." He gestured dramatically toward Linda, who had adopted an expression of saintly patience. "They did this without complaint, Your Honor, despite the significant financial burden it placed on their household. Now that Miss Sarah Bennett has secured lucrative employment as a registered nurse, my client simply asks for reasonable compensation for these extraordinary expenses." James took notes throughout, his expression neutral. When his turn came, he approached the bench with calm confidence. "Your Honor, this case isn't about compensation for childcare expenses." It's about accountability for funds that were specifically designated for Sarah Bennett's care following her mother's death. Funds that were substantial and more than adequate to provide for her needs, without additional contribution from the defendant. Judge Ellison leaned forward slightly. "You're referring to survivor benefits." "Yes, Your Honour, and more," James replied. "We have documentation showing Mrs. Linda Bennett received Social Security survivor benefits, life insurance proceeds, and inheritance funds totaling nearly $190,000 that should have been used exclusively for Sarah's care or held in trust for her future." A small murmur ran through the courtroom. Linda's composed facade cracked slightly as she whispered urgently to her attorney. "That's a serious allegation, Counselor," Judge Ellison noted. "I'll need to see that documentation." "Let's proceed with testimony." Linda took the stand first, describing how she'd rescued me from potential foster care after my mother's death. She detailed the sacrifices her family made: Olivia sharing her home with a cousin she barely knew, family vacations curtailed due to the expense of another child, the emotional labour of helping a grieving teenager adjust. Mr. Reynolds dramatically presented Linda's itemized invoice, walking through each category of expense. Linda nodded earnestly as he highlighted particularly costly items: braces I'd needed but never received, sports equipment for activities I'd never participated in, special tutoring I'd never been offered. "And did the Social Security benefits you received cover these expenses?" Mr. Reynolds asked. Linda shook her head solemnly. "Not even close. The monthly benefit barely covered her food. Everything else came from our pocket." When James rose for cross-examination, his approach was methodical. He established Linda as my legal guardian, responsible for managing any assets or benefits for my welfare. Then he began introducing exhibits: bank statements showing regular deposits from Social Security, documents regarding my mother's life insurance policy, and records of my grandparents' inheritance. "Mrs. Bennett, can you explain why you're claiming financial hardship when records show you received over $3,000 monthly designated specifically for Sarah's care?" Linda shifted uncomfortably. "That's not accurate. The Social Security was much less." James presented another document. "This statement from the Social Security Administration confirms monthly payments of $1,235 paid to you as Sarah's guardian. Additionally, you received a lump sum life insurance payment of $65,000 and inheritance funds of $15,000, both legally required to be used for Sarah's benefit." "Where did these funds go?" Linda's composure crumbled further. "There were many expenses. Household costs increased substantially. We had to move to a larger home to accommodate her." "Mrs. Bennett," James continued, "during the 5 years Sarah lived with you, these funds totaled approximately $190,000. Yet you provided her with second-hand clothes, denied her orthodontic care, made her work to pay for her own basic needs, and now claim she owes you an additional $50,000. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Linda's attorney objected repeatedly, but Judge Ellison allowed most of James's questions, her expression growing increasingly concerned as Linda's answers became more evasive. "When it was my turn to testify, I focused on facts rather than emotions. The different treatment compared to Olivia, being required to pay rent from my part-time job earnings, the lack of support for educational expenses, and the discovery of benefit statements in Uncle Tom's office. Mr. Reynolds's cross-examination attempted to paint me as ungrateful and entitled. Wasn't it generous of the Bennetts to take you in rather than sending you to foster care? Don't you think you owe them something for the roof over your head for 5 years?" Before I could answer, Judge Ellison interrupted. "Counselor, the question of whether a minor child owes a legal guardian for basic necessities is inappropriate. The guardian voluntarily accepted legal responsibility along with the benefits provided for the child's care." The judge called a brief recess after testimony concluded. When court resumed, she had reviewed all the financial documentation provided by both sides. I've seen enough, Judge Ellison announced, removing her reading glasses. Mrs. Bennet, would you please approach the bench? Linda rose shakily. Her earlier confidence evaporated. Mrs. Bennet, as Sarah's legal guardian, you had a fiduciary duty to use all funds designated for her care, either to provide for her immediate needs or to preserve them for her future. The evidence presented today suggests you did neither. The judge shuffled through the documents before continuing, her voice stern. You received approximately $190,000 meant for Sarah's benefit. Based on your own testimony and the evidence presented, it appears these funds were commingled with your personal accounts and used primarily for your family's expenses, not Sarah's. Linda attempted to interrupt, but Judge Ellison held up her hand. I'm not finished. Not only did you apparently misappropriate these funds, but you've now had the audacity to sue your niece for additional money, claiming expenses that should have been more than covered by the benefits you received. She turned to address the entire courtroom, her voice ringing with authority. I am dismissing Mrs. Bennet's claim with prejudice. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into potential misuse of Social Security benefits and breach of fiduciary duty. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Ethan squeezed my hand so tightly it almost hurt. Mia wiped tears from her eyes. Judge Ellison continued, Miss Sarah Bennet, you have the right to pursue civil recovery of misappropriated funds if you wish. My clerk will provide information on that process should you decide to proceed. With a final bang of her gavel, it was over. Linda stood frozen by the bench, her face ashen. Uncle Tom stared at the floor while Olivia frantically texted on her phone. As we exited the courtroom, James smiled broadly. Congratulations, that couldn't have gone better. What happens now? I asked, still processing the judge's words. That's up to you, James replied. You could pursue recovery of the funds, but that would mean another legal battle, or you can consider this closed and move forward with your life. Ethan put his arm around my shoulders. Whatever you decide, you're not alone. Looking back at Linda being consoled by her attorney, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for what might have been. The family support I'd been denied, the love that should have followed my mother's death. But I also felt something else, freedom from the guilt and obligation Linda had burdened me with for years. Outside the courthouse, standing in the bright sunlight, I made my decision. I don't want their money. I just want to close this chapter and start my own life. James nodded understandingly. Sometimes the victory that matters most isn't financial. It's the truth being recognized. As we walked down the courthouse steps, I noticed a familiar figure waiting near the bottom. Mrs. Thompson, my high school biology teacher and mentor, had come to support me. Her presence was the final validation I needed, a reminder that true family isn't always defined by blood. The days following the trial brought a strange mixture of emotions, relief, vindication, lingering sadness, and a new sense of freedom. Ethan drove me home from the courthouse in thoughtful silence, occasionally squeezing my hand when words seemed inadequate. Mia and the Wilsons had organised a small gathering at my apartment, their way of showing support without explicitly celebrating what had been, at its core, a family tragedy. As friends shared food and quiet conversation, I slipped onto my small balcony for a moment alone. The setting sun cast long shadows across the city, a visual reminder that one chapter was ending while another began. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. This isn't over. Family doesn't treat family this way. I stared at the message, recognizing the bitter irony in her words. Family doesn't treat family the way she had treated me, as a financial transaction, a burden, an obligation rather than a person to love. For the first time, I deleted her message without feeling guilt or obligation to respond. Ethan joined me on the balcony, wrapping his jacket around my shoulders against the evening chill. You okay? I think I will be, I answered honestly. It's just a lot to process. The following morning, I began my first official shift at Seattle Children's Hospital. Walking through those doors wearing scrubs and my mother's pearl earrings felt like fulfilling a promise made long ago. The pediatric intensive care unit was challenging but rewarding, each small patient reminding me why I'd fought so hard to reach this point. My supervisor, Nurse Susan, took me under her wing, patiently guiding me through protocols and introducing me to the unique emotional demands of pediatric nursing. "You have a natural way with the children," she observed during my first week. "Some nurses take years to develop that kind of connection." I didn't tell her about my own childhood losses, not yet. Those wounds were still healing, the scars still tender to touch. Instead, I channeled my experiences into empathy for my patients and their families, recognizing the fear in parents' eyes and the courage in children facing pain beyond their understanding. 2 weeks after the trial, Uncle Tom called. His voice sounded tired, defeated. "Sarah, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I wanted you to know I had no idea about the extent of what Linda was doing. The Social Security, yes, but not the life insurance or inheritance." "You still let her treat me like a burden," I replied, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "You watched it happen every day for 5 years and did nothing." His heavy sigh carried through the phone. "You're right. My passivity makes me complicit. I should have protected you and I failed. I'm sorry, though I know that's inadequate." After a long pause, he added, "Linda and I are separating." The trial was a wake-up call about who she really is, who I've allowed myself to become by standing by. "I just wanted you to know." I felt no satisfaction in their marriage's collapse, only a complicated sadness for the family that might have been mine but never truly was. "I hope you find peace, Uncle Tom. I really do." That conversation marked the last direct contact with Linda's household. Through mutual connections, I learned the district attorney had decided not to pursue criminal charges, but had required Linda to complete financial management courses and community service. Olivia occasionally sent hostile messages on social media, which I eventually solved by blocking her accounts. As summer turned to fall, I established routines in my new life. Challenging but fulfilling shifts at the hospital, quiet evenings with Ethan planning our future, weekend brunches with Mia and friends from nursing school. The apartment slowly transformed from a sterile space to a true home filled with plants, photographs, and small treasures that represented my emerging identity. One September afternoon, I received an unexpected email from the hospital's Human Resources Department. A trust fund had been established in my mother's name to provide scholarships for nursing students from single-parent households. The anonymous donor had requested I serve on the selection committee, if willing. The attached documentation revealed the trust had been funded with exactly $50,000, the amount Linda had demanded from me. A separate note from the hospital's legal department confirmed the donation had come from Uncle Tom. That evening, I called Mrs. Thompson to share the news. After all these years, she remained my trusted advisor in life's complicated moments. "It sounds like his way of making amends," she observed, "not erasing the past, but trying to create something positive from it." "Should I accept the committee position?" I asked. "Part of me wants nothing to do with anything connected to that family." "Consider this," she replied thoughtfully. "The committee position isn't about them. It's about honoring your mother and helping students who share your experience. Don't let Linda take that opportunity from you too." Her wisdom, as always, cut through my confusion. The following day, I accepted the position, my first small step toward transforming pain into purpose. As my first year of professional nursing progressed, I found myself increasingly drawn to working with children from difficult home situations. Their resilience reminded me of my own journey, their small victories becoming personal triumphs. I celebrated alongside them. The hospital's social worker noticed my connection with these patients and invited me to join a support program for children in foster care or kinship guardianship. "Sometimes the best healing comes from helping others through similar struggles," she explained. Ethan supported my growing involvement in these programs, often accompanying me to events for the children. His medical residency was demanding, but we carved out time for our relationship, planning a small wedding for the following spring. The Wilsons and Carters had essentially adopted me into their families, providing the loving support network I'd missed for so many years. 6 months after the trial, on my mother's birthday, I finally felt ready to visit her grave. Ethan offered to come with me, but this was a journey I needed to make alone. The cemetery in Everett, Washington, was peaceful, autumn leaves creating a golden canopy over the modest headstone. I placed fresh flowers beside her name, then sat on the grass to tell her everything. My nursing career, the truth about Linda, finding love with Ethan, and the scholarship fund now bearing her name. "I survived, Mum," I whispered, tears flowing freely. "Not just survived, but found my way to thrive. I think you'd be proud of that." On the drive home, I made a detour to visit Mrs. Davis, our former neighbour who had watched me on the day of my mother's diagnosis. Now in her 80s, she welcomed me with surprised delight, serving tea in chipped cups as we caught up on the years between. Her walls still displayed photographs of her own children and grandchildren, and there, on a crowded shelf, stood a small framed picture of my mother and me at a long-ago birthday party. "She was so proud of you," Mrs. Davis recalled, following my gaze to the photograph. "Always said you had her compassion, but twice her determination. Looks like she was right." These small reconnections with my past helped stitch together the fragmented narrative of my life. Each conversation, each memory shared by those who had known my mother, added another thread to the tapestry of my identity, separate from Linda's distortions and manipulations. As my healing progressed, I began seeing a therapist specializing in family trauma. Dr. Morgan helped me understand that Linda's treatment hadn't been my fault, that children aren't responsible for earning their guardian's love or care. Gradually, the nightmares decreased, the anxiety attacks became less frequent, and the reflexive guilt over costing too much began to fade. The hardest part of healing, Dr. Morgan observed during one session, is accepting that some people who should have loved us were incapable of doing so. Their limitation doesn't diminish your worthiness. Those words became a mantra during difficult moments, a reminder that Linda's coldness reflected her character, not my value. 1 year after the trial, I received an unexpected package. Inside was my mother's nursing pin from her graduation, along with several photographs I'd thought lost forever. A brief note from Uncle Tom explained he'd found them in storage while moving to his new apartment. That small brass pin became a talisman I carried in my pocket during difficult shifts, a tangible connection to the woman whose love had shaped me far more profoundly than Linda's neglect ever could. Life continues to unfold in ways both expected and surprising. Ethan and I married in a simple ceremony surrounded by chosen family. We're saving for a house where we can build the warm, supportive home environment neither of our childhoods fully provided. My career advances steadily, with a recent promotion to charge nurse in the pediatric unit. The scholarship fund in my mother's name has already helped 3 students pursue nursing degrees. Each recipient reminds me of myself a few years ago, determined, resilient, carrying invisible burdens while working toward a future built on service to others. Looking back at the journey from that terrified 13-year-old girl clutching her mother's letter to the woman I am today, I recognize the profound truth that has emerged from all the pain. Family isn't defined by blood or legal documents. It's created through love, respect, and mutual support, qualities Linda never understood, but that I found in abundance with the people who've chosen to walk alongside me. The judge's words in that courtroom did more than dismiss Linda's lawsuit. They validated my worth and right to be treated with dignity. But the real victory wasn't legal. It was learning that despite everything, I remained capable of trust, love, and connection. Linda took my childhood, but she couldn't take my future or my capacity for joy. If you're watching this and struggling with family who treats you as a burden rather than a blessing, please know your worth isn't determined by their limitations. True family sees your value without calculating your cost. Sometimes we have to create that family for ourselves, building connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Have you ever had to redefine family in your own life? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe and hit that like button so others in similar situations might find some comfort here too. Thank you for listening to my journey from surviving to thriving, from being someone's burden to becoming my own person. Remember, your story isn't finished yet, and the most beautiful chapters may still be unwritten.